Hello and welcome to the first tutorial video of KeyStage. KeyStage is a master controller app with audio unit hosting and mixing capabilities, which is optimized for live performance. In this video, I'll go through the core structure of KeyStage, how you can control hardware and software synthesizers and audio unit plugins. In the description of this video, you can access to the different parts of this tutorial video. But for new users, I suggest that you watch this video from beginning to end and from another device possibly, either from your phone or from your computer, while you have KeyStage open in front of you on your iPad. Now there are two versions of KeyStage, KeyStage Lite and the full version. Now the Lite version has a trial mode which allows you to basically test all the features of KeyStage, including all the new in-app purchases. Now here I'm running the full version of KeyStage, freshly installed. The full version also have a trial mode which allows you to test all the in-app purchases. So you go to Preferences, General Settings, In-app Purchases, and tap Try All Units. So the trial mode of full version is similar to the trial mode of Lite version, where you have 2-hour-long sessions and all the in-app purchases are unlocked, but you cannot save your songs or load your songs, and you cannot do any recordings. Now in this tutorial, I'm going to use my Nord Electro 5 keyboard. It's not connected to the iPad yet, but in order to use it with KeyStage, I need to turn the local control off. Now I'm going to connect it to my iPad using a camera connection kit. And KeyStage suggests an instrument preset for Nord Electro 5. So KeyStage has a database of instrument presets for different hardware and software instruments. So depending on your hardware, you may or may not see this message. But here I'm gonna download the instrument presets for Nord Electro. And I'm gonna assign this instrument presets to the output port of Nord Electro. So later in the tutorial, I'm gonna explain what instrument presets are. Now the main interface of KeyStage have three regions. Here is the tracks region, the parts region, and the sections region. So the interface looks like a standard DAW, where the tracks are your Midi connection hubs and the sections are basically your timeline, the discrete timeline. So I'm going to start with tracks. I'm going to create a track, and to do that I double tap anywhere on this region. So each track has inputs and outputs. So these are MIDI inputs and outputs. So first I'm going to choose my Nord keyboard as my MIDI input. So as you can see that there is this light blinking indicating that I'm sending MIDI signals from my Nord keyboard. So I select that. In fact, I can choose multiple inputs for each track. Now with version 2.0, KeyStage can host audio units, instrument audio units. So an audio unit is an audio plugin integrated into a synthesizer or sampler app, which can directly be opened in a host like KeyStage here. So when I tap output here, I can see that there are these instrument units, effect units, and MIDI processor units. So these are audio units, and these can be unlocked with in-app purchases. And the other units are native units of KeyStage. So there are three categories here. And MIDI connections are basically the MIDI connections, either the hardware connections or apps that are running in the background. So I'm gonna start with instrument units, and I'm gonna load Module Pro. So as soon as I load the audio unit, its user interface shows. And I can basically drag and rescale this window in any way I want. When I tap this, it just closes. And to reopen the user interface, you simply double tap on the track. So here's the user interface of Module Pro. And I can basically choose any instrument directly from this user interface. Now I'm going to create a track for my Nord Electro's inbuilt sound engine. So again, as the input, I choose Nord Electro, and now I'm going to go to MIDI connections, and here is Nord Electro 5 MIDI input. It's the input of Nord. And you see that right now only Nord Electro is activated. I don't hear Module Pro sound, but if I select this track, I can hear the sound of Module Pro right now. So I can switch back and forth between these two tracks. So audio units can have multiple instances inside a host app. So I can have two Module Pro instances inside KeyStage. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this track. And to do that, I hold this track with 2 fingers and drag it down. And it creates another copy of Module Pro. So I can choose another sound here. So let's choose a sound from one of the libraries, in-app purchase libraries. Now, some synthesizer and sampler apps do not support audio units, but KeyStage can still control them via MIDI. So I'm gonna open a track, and to demonstrate it, I'm gonna load Synth1 by AudioKit. So this is a synthesizer which does not support audio units. Right now, when I play my keyboard, it directly sends signals to AudioKit Synth1. So this is similar to the local control and should be cut off. Every MIDI signal should go through KeyStage. So I go to settings and I can see that the MIDI channel in is Omni, which means that it accepts MIDI signals from all channels. And my Node keyboard sends MIDI signals on channel 1. So if I set this to MIDI channel 2, it doesn't directly get signals from my Node keyboard, which is what I want. And you also should make sure that the audio background mode of any synth app that's running in the background should be on. And I also turn auto sleep off. This is important for live performance. So I go back to KeyStage, and now KeyStage suggests me an instrument preset for AudioKit Synth1. So this is also in the database. So I'm gonna load that as well and assign it to the output of Synth1. So as always, I choose my Node Electro as my input. And if I go to output and tap MIDI connections, I can see AudioKit Synth1 now. So I don't hear any sound. The reason is that the output channel here is assigned as 1. But I just changed the input channel of AudioKit Synth1 to channel 2. So I should also, so these channels should match. So I select channel 2. And therefore now I can play AudioKit Synth1 from KeyStage. These output channels usually doesn't matter for most of the audio units because most of them really just accept signals from all channels. But there are certain audio units which are multi-timbral and which produce different sounds through different channels. So for example, Galileo 2 organ actually accepts signals from 3 different channels. So there is the upper organ, 2 for the lower organ, and for the pedals it receives signals from channel 3. So it really matters what channel you choose for audio units like a Galileo organ. Okay, let's create a part by double tapping here. Now a section is automatically created as well. Now when I play my keyboard, I can only hear Node Electro's string sound. And this is because now I'm on section 1, and on section 1 there is only one part corresponding to Node Electro, and there are no parts corresponding to other tracks. So what happens here, all the tracks are connected to the corresponding parts here. So right now there is only one part corresponding to Node Electro. What happens is, when I play my keyboard, MIDI signals coming from this track first goes into this part and then goes back onto this track and routed to Node Electro. But there are no parts corresponding to these tracks, therefore they are just muted. There are no signals going through that. But for example, if I create another part here, now I can hear both Node Electro and Module Pro second instance. And I can move these parts around by just holding and dragging them. And now I layer AudioKit Synth and Node Electro. By the way, if I tap this solo button here, when a part is selected, only the corresponding track will sound. Only the corresponding track will receive MIDI signals. This is actually really good for editing that specific part. But when the section is selected, the solo button basically does not function. Okay. So when I select a part editor just appears here, and there are 2 sections here. There's parameters section and translators section. So let's go to the parameters section. I can see that there is this instrument tab and there are a bunch of parameters here. So where do these parameters come from? They actually come from the instrument preset that was loaded when I first connected my Node Electro. So remember, there's this database of instrument presets, and these instrument presets basically contains information about parameters and as well as the instruments. When I say instrument, I mean a combination of program change and bank select messages. So I can change instruments on my Node Electro by sending program change messages. But that's not an easy way to do. The better way is to basically choose instruments from a list. And instrument presets basically contains these informations, these lists of names, instrument names, and their corresponding program change and bank select messages. Or I can control the effects. For example, effect 4 is the delay. And by the way, these effects can be activated or deactivated by just pressing this button here. if I create a part for an audio unit, a similar list of effects appears here. But this time, these effects are actually imported from the audio unit itself. So there is no need for instrument presets for audio units. These two parameters, however, are the internal parameters of KeyStage. The unit volume and audio unit pan. These are not important from the audio units. And audio units have a preset system. So there is this preset button here and also here, which accesses the same menu. So I can actually choose factory presets here. Or I can create my own presets in KeyStage. So for example, if I change some of the parameters here, like attack time, and I tap presets button, I have this KeyStage presets and I say current presets. So let's say brass low attack time. So this preset is saved in KeyStage. So I can access here and directly call that preset back. So let's go into the Translators tab here. So there are 3 additional tabs under Translators: Standards, Custom Translators, and Live Control Units. I'm going to talk about these 2 later in the tutorial, but let's go to the Translators, Standard Translators. So there's the Range Limiter and Pitch Shifter, which are the most 2 important standard translator. Let's create a split using Range Limiter. So when I tap Range Limiter, I have a new window here. This is actually new in KeyStage 2.0. Now the full range is selected right now, and I can simply play notes to add notes to the range limiter, to the range of this part. Or I can play intervals by simultaneously playing 2 notes to add intervals to my range. Or I can drag my finger across this keyboard to add ranges. And similarly, I can remove notes from a range by either dragging my finger across the keyboard or by playing notes. So those played notes will be removed, or the intervals. Or I can simply mute the whole range or just set it as full range. So let's choose a range for this audio kit synth 1. Sorry, I need to press add notes, and let's mute first and choose this range. And okay, let's change the instrument. It's hard to demonstrate with this instrument. Let's choose a pad. And for this instrument, I'm gonna choose this range. Okay, let's delete this part and activate the section. Now I just simply create a simple split on my keyboard. And let's do a layering. And to do that, I'm gonna simply copy this parts onto Nord Electro, and all the information on the parts, including the range limiter, is also copied. So I haven't. So now the solo switch on and part is selected. That's why I'm only hearing Nord Electro. But if I select the section, I hear both Nord Electro and Module Pro second instance on my left hand and AudioKit Synth 1 on my right hand. So similar to parameters, the translators can also be activated and deactivated by pressing these buttons here. And when a translator is deactivated, it basically does not function. All the signals just bypass that translator. So that's why I see full range here on this part, because the range limiter is not activated. But when I activate it, I can see the range directly on the part here. Now let's move on to the pitch shifter. So pitch shifter allows you to add pitch shifts basically, and mostly used for octave shifts. And I'm just going to show you the easier way to assign pitch shifts. I press key input, and with reference to middle C, which is C3, I'm going to just press a note. For example, if I press C4, it adds the pitch shift amount of 12 to the pitch shifter. So right now, this part is transposed by 1 octave. But I'm not restricted to octaves, so I can even just do some transpositions. Like I can even add multiple pitch shifts. And similarly, when I did deactivate the pitch shifter, it just doesn't transpose any notes. The velocity translator basically manipulates the velocity. So this 0 and 127 means the lower range and the upper range of the velocities of the notes. So if I take this all the way up to 120, all the notes are converted into full velocity notes. Or I can just choose a low velocity. And if I choose a range here, the incoming velocities are translated between these two numbers. So I cannot have a velocity lower than 42 and higher than 100 with this setup. So mono simply turns the instrument into a mono instrument. It's usually useful for lead sounds. Now in the pedal controls, there is this auto sustain, which is a very nice feature. It automatically simulates the sustain pedal when I play my instrument. Usually very useful for chords. So when I activate auto sustain, there is this pedal signal appearing here to indicate that there is a pedal translator applying to this part. And when I play a chord and release my fingers, the sustain pedal is automatically pressed until I change the chord, press another chord. So I'm not actually using my sustain pedal right now. Everything is automatically simulated in KeyStage. Now let's create another section. I'm gonna do it by copying this part here. So this part is copied now on section 2, and only audio kit synth 1 plays on this range. So let's change the instrument here, and let's change the range limiter. So this is full range, and I don't want any instruments on this section. Changing sections is very simple. You just tap anywhere on the section. You can press the sections on themselves, but you can also just tap anywhere on the vertical line corresponding to that section. So now I have this split. And now I have full range of audio kits. I'm going to spend some time on this full state business of audio units because it's really important in live performance. So I just started a new project from blank, and I'm just going to create an instrument. Just choose another instrument. Let's choose Synthmaster 1. And I'm going to connect my keyboards. I'm going to create a part here. Let's reduce the volume a bit. Now, full states of audio units are basically snapshots of the current state of the unit itself, including the instrument information and all the parameters. And KeyStage stores all these informations into parts. So for example, this information together with all these parameters here are stored on this part. And if I create another part, since I haven't changed anything, I'm on the same full state. Let's change the instrument here. And let's change some of the parameters. Now, this full state is stored on part 2. And if I activate part 1, so when I switch between section 1 and 2, those full states are called back from the corresponding part and send it to Synthmaster 1 instrument. But if I deactivate full states here on the track, this means that the full states are no longer called back from parts. So whatever the last state is, it just stays there. And even if I change the instrument here now, so the state changes, but when I activate this part, that's not called back. So there was another instrument stored on this part too, but it's not called back anymore. So this is really useful when you don't need to change the instrument on a specific audio unit. You simply just disable full states, and it will just stay the same instrument throughout the song. However, you can still adjust the parameters, and now you realize that these parameters have active buttons next to them. So if I turn full state on, they don't have these active buttons here. They are always activated because now the structure is based on full states. But when I deactivate it, I can individually change these parameters and activate them or deactivate them. So for example, I activate the unit volume here and choose a low volume. And here, I choose a high volume. And suppose I have another part which I don't activate the unit volume. So if I'm on this part, I'm on low volume. When I activate this part, I'm on high volume. But when I activate this part, the volume doesn't change. Whatever the volume was in the previous state just stays the same. So if I move from section 1 to 3, I'm on low volume, but if I move from section 2 to 3, I'm on high volume. And this just applies to all parameters, all audio unit parameters. So I still have some control over the instrument, like the parameters or volume, but the full states are not getting called back. However, if I activate full states on the track, I can still control the full state of individual parts here. So for example, I am on one instrument, and on section 2, I don't want to change the instrument. So let's delete this part and copy this part here. So both parts have the same instrument, but when I play instrument part on section 1 and change to section 2, the sound cuts off. The reason is the full state on this part gets called back and sent to synthmaster 1. So the behavior of audio units may change. For example, synthmaster 1 cuts the sounds when it receives a full state. So to prevent that, I just disable full state on this part, and when I change from part 1 to part 2, the sound doesn't cut off because it's the same instrument, no full states are getting called back. However, when I want to change the instrument here, since this part's full state is not active, this change will not be stored on the second part. So if I go back to part 1 and back to part 2, it's just the same instrument on part 1 because the full state on part 2 is not active. Seamless audio is one of the most important requirements in live performance. You don't want your sound to cut off when you change your instrument or change your section. So KeyStage has this internal structure called note keeper. Basically, every track has a note keeper which keeps tracks of all pressed notes or unpressed notes. For example, if I press a chord here and change the second section, even if there is no part on Sunriser, the sound doesn't cut off. The notes are still playing until I start lifting my fingers from the keyboard. So taking into consideration of range limiters and pitch shifters, the note keeper basically keeps track of all notes and makes sure that there won't be any stuck notes or note cutoffs. But seamless audio actually mostly depends on the synthesizer itself. So for example, on Sunriser, if I create another part here and change the instrument here, when I change the section, when I change the instrument, Sunriser automatically cuts the sound. And in fact, this is the case for most of the audio units. Where there are some exceptions, for example, audio layer managed to simulate the seamless audio on its own, even if you change the instrument. So let me choose a factory preset here and create another part here and choose another instrument. Now, when I'm playing this instrument, I go to another section, the sound just keeps playing. So audio layer handles those sounds, and when I press new sound, new notes, the new sound plays. So audio layer handles this seamless audio automatically. But of course, this is not the case for most audio units and also for hardware instruments. So there are a couple of approaches for seamless audio. The most basic one is using two instances of the same audio unit and alternate parts between these two audio units. So for example, I have an instrument here and I go to section 2. The second instance just keeps playing. So without any audio interruption, I can just switch to the other sounds. So suppose I choose another sound here on the third part. So this basically guarantees seamless audio when I change between sections, but at a cost of performance and memory. So creating two instances of every audio unit costs a lot of memory and CPU power. Actually, there are some live performance apps which does this automatically. So when you create an audio unit, it creates another instance automatically to support the seamless audio, but at a cost of processing power and memory, of course. And you don't need to do that for certain audio units like audio layer. And there are some other ways to handle this seamless audio. For example, using full stage, like in the previous section. Okay, let's move on to the effect units. So let's create a track. I'm gonna choose the effect units in the category. I'm gonna load this amazing reverb by Chematica. Now, in order to connect this effect, I need to access to the main mixer. So main mixer is also a new feature of KeyStage 2.0. And so I have this trumpet, swamp trumpet instruments by audio modeling. And all I need to do is just grab this effect and just leave it on the effects chain. So it's that easy. By the way, on the main mixer, you can directly access these audio units user interfaces by tapping on them. And since it's a mixer, you can control the volume. So let's actually simulate it by creating another instrument, this time GeoShred. Here's my Node keyboard. And let's also load a SWAM instrument here, one of my favorites, GeoCello. Okay, so these are MP instruments. You actually need an MP controller, but actually what it simply does is check the output channels. Channel 1 on GeoShred corresponds to the global channel. It doesn't accept note signals from the global channel 1. So if I change it to any other channel, like channel 2, it simply starts playing. So you can actually control these amazing instruments by regular keyboards. Let's create another effect. So let's choose a simple one like this cutoff filter. So now I layer GeoShred and SWAM engine. Let's actually create a simple split to distinguish the two sounds. And actually the range of the trumpet is not suitable for the lower range of my key, so I'm going to apply a pitch shift. And I can change those instruments. So it's as simple as that. Now let's talk more about this main mixer. Now let's just create another section with only GeoShred on the full keyboard. Now when I tap the main mixer, you notice that the track corresponding to SWAM engine is darkened. So that's because on section 2, the SWAM engine doesn't have a corresponding part. So that basically represents the fact that there is no part corresponding to SWAM engine. So if I go back to section 1, there is actually a corresponding part on the SWAM engine. And the same thing also works with effect units. So suppose I have this structure. So on section 1, the reverb effect has a corresponding part, but the filter doesn't. On section 2, both have corresponding parts. So you can actually have an idea of which instruments are connected to their corresponding tracks and which are not, depending on the section. So this mixer changes dynamically when I change sections. You can also change the parameters and instruments dynamically on the main mixer view as long as there's a corresponding part. So here's what happens. I tap on GeoShred and I make sure that this save changes or part is active. This actually means that any change that I do here while I'm on main mixer mode are stored on parts, including all the volume values and every adjustment that I make inside the audio units. But of course, as long as there is a corresponding part. So here I'm on section 1, there is a corresponding part on GeoShred. Let's choose another instrument. So here's a guitar simulator. So I change the instrument here. Well, of course, the full state is not saved there, so I'm gonna change the instrument back to cello here. So these changes are saved on those parts. But suppose I try to do the same thing with SWAM engine. So I choose a classical sound here, and on section 2, I try to change the instrument. Just choose another instrument here, but since there's no part here, when I go back here, okay, it's classical on the first part, but on section 2, it's still classical because there's no part here. And the good thing is you can also change the states of effects. So I have this, let's choose another preset here, this basement reverb. And on section 2, I'm on cello, the instrument changed on GeoShred, but I can also change the reverb level. So I have a lower reverb level, a lower wet-dry mix here, and a completely different preset here. So the effect units can also change dynamically from section to section. Now, other than that, we have this mute option. So it mutes the track, and you can see that now this track is grayed out. This basically means that the audio unit sound is cut off, but also the MIDI signals are blocked as well. As you see, the MIDI blink out is off as well, even if I'm on the range. So mute basically cuts audio and MIDI simultaneously. So let's move on to the MIDI processors. So here, MIDI processor units, I'm going to choose GeoShred. So GeoShred is also a MIDI controller. And since I choose this under the category of MIDI processors, this doesn't produce any sound on its own. But it produces MIDI. And how you do this is you double tap. So here's my GeoShred. It doesn't produce any sound right now. But those audio units which have MIDI outputs, basically, it can be either MIDI processor unit or an instrument unit or an effect unit. Those may also have MIDI outputs. Those who have MIDI outputs have this new tab called Connected Tracks. So now I can see Sunriser here, and I connect it to Sunriser. And if I tap on Sunriser and look at the MIDI inputs, now I can see that JShred is connected, MIDI from audio units. So whenever I create an audio unit with a MIDI output, it basically shows on this list here. So let's do another one. I'm gonna create another instrument, Beathawk. And Beathawk works really well without full state because it's already a multi-timbre instrument. So I'm just turning off the full state. So the current, I have some drum sounds here. And now I'm going to create another MIDI processor unit called Atom Piano Roll. So this is actually a sequencer. Let's connect my Node keyboard to Atom Roll, and let's choose the connected track to Beathawk. And by the way, right now it doesn't work. The reason is that the track is selected. When a track is selected, there are no MIDI messages going out to the other tracks. I need to select a section and I need to activate a part. So as you see now, my Atom Roll send signals to Beathawk. It actually sends signals, so let's turn off solo, only on the first track. So here I'm going to choose a full drum set instead. Let's solo this again. So this is a sequencer, and in order to use a sequencer I need transport functions. So this is the new transport functions of KeyStage, and if I start play, with 1 bar pre-count, it starts playing. You can see the indicator here that we are on a 4/4 measure. If I tap here, I have the access to the tempo, time signature, and metronome properties. So without going too much into detail, let's turn on the metronome. There is this pre-count bar, 1 bar pre-count. So this means that when I go to the beginning, it will have 1 bar pre-count. So let's enable loop record, go to the beginning, and start recording. So if I press bypass MIDI, it basically stops playing. It still routes the MIDI signals coming into Atom directly to its outputs. If I open the main mixer, now you can see that there is this MIDI units here. This switch button here switches between effect units and MIDI units. Since there are no effect units, I cannot really switch to anything. Now I can activate the MIDI units directly on the main mixer. So let's move on to the other units. So these are KeyStage's own units. There are 3 types: input, mixer, and player units. Let's start with mixer units. So mixer units are basically sub-mixers in KeyStage. The mixer unit shows up here on our main mixer, and I have 3 effects. So I have a simple split here. And what I'm going to do is let's put one of the effects here. So this is an amp simulator, one of the best actually. And I put a reverb on my iSymphonic. Let's decrease the mix a little bit. And I want to pass these signals through a single effect, which is a channel equalizer. These are routed to the main speakers of my iPad. If there was an audio interface connected to the iPad, you would actually see the name of the audio interface with the channels. So when you tap here, there are the hardware outputs and the mixer units. So this is now routed to the mixer. Let's route both of them to the mixer. And let's connect this to the mixer unit. So you can see that this effect applies to everything that is connected to the mixer. Or I can take this amp simulator here. So now my strings are also amped. And you can just use the volume and pan on the mixer units as well. Moving on to the next, which is probably the most advanced unit, is the player unit. So player unit is an audio player with lots of additional functionalities. So current audio file is none, and if I tap here, I don't have anything. I haven't really imported any audio here. Let's do that. I'm gonna go into my Dropbox. I created a simple folder called KeyStage tutorial, and I have an MP3 here. Let's export it into KeyStage. So a media file is uploaded, and actually you can locate this media file from files. When I double tap on the media file, there are two folders like PDF and audio files, imported files, and here is the MP3 that I imported. And when I tap on the audio player, now from the imported files I can access the audio. So this is a song that we have recently released with my band Alkera. So the audio player just shows the waveform. You have the volume control. You have the follow button, you can follow the timeline. You have the left and right locators, and you have the loop function. So it just keeps between the two locators, loops between the two locators if you want. And moreover, you can add markers. So move here and add another marker. I can select these markers, move them around, rename them. Chorus. So how are we going to use the markers? Here's how we use them. So the audio player has some automation functions with the parts. So let's create a part here with an active part. I have this new option here. When a part is activated, do nothing. Okay, it does nothing right now, but when I select something like start playing from left locator, here's what happens. So every time I activate this section corresponding to this part, it starts playing from the left locator. Or for example, you can choose start playing from chorus here. So when I activate here, it starts from that specific marker. And suppose on this part, I want to stop playing when I activate it. So start playing from chorus, stops playing. And let's say I want to start playing from marker 2 this time. So you can basically automate player units with these special actions on parts. This suspend triggers is a nice mechanism to suspend all these automatic triggers temporarily, of course. So when suspend triggers is on, none of these triggers happen. So finally, we have the input units. Well, when you first load KeyStage, you're prompted to activate the microphone for KeyStage. And I purposely did not do that because I want to show you that you may encounter this message, access is denied because I haven't enabled microphone on KeyStage. So I first need to enable it. For a microphone doesn't just mean iPad's microphone. If you have an audio interface connected, that means that audio interface's input is also muted. So you have to specifically allow KeyStage to access it. Okay, so I'm using the iPad's inbuilt microphone. The one that I'm using is actually not connected to my iPad. Okay, so this is the iPad's microphone, and it's just there's no audio interface connected to the iPad, so that's why I'm getting this feedback. But basically, you can connect your guitars, you can connect your vocals, pass them through effects, and so on. Custom translators are probably the most versatile and complex units of KeyStage. So I'll probably just go over the surface here, just give a couple of examples of how we can use custom translators. So when I go to translators, there's the second tab called custom translators. And I add a custom translator, add a new one. So each custom translator has an input and an output. So these are MIDI translators. There are incoming MIDI signals and outgoing MIDI signals or actions. So I will show about that later. But let's just first look at the basic translation function. So suppose I want to, well, there's actually this MIDI learn function here. I'm going to activate that. I have this volume knob here on my North Electro. I activate it and it's control change 7. Let's just convert it into something else, just pitch bend. So I'm actually turning the volume knob of my North. So this is the basic option. You have upper and lower limit that you can assign. For pitch band values, 48 means full pitch up, minus 48 means full pitch down. So I can activate and deactivate custom translators just like other translators. You can also add custom translators on tracks. Let's add one here. And let's say this time I want to change the functionality of my expression pedal, which is control change 11, to okay, now we are on an audio unit. I can access its audio unit parameters. So these are specific to this audio unit. Let's choose cutoff. And if I actually activate it, you can see that the cutoff frequencies changes with my expression pedal. And let's create another unit here. I want to get the expression pedal again and change the unit volume. Now, it doesn't work. The reason is the following. When I tap the name of the song, the new song in this case, I can get the song properties. Now, since there are more than one custom translator, one on track, the ones on track applies to all parts, by the way. The order of this matters because, for example, this changes the expression pedal into cutoff frequency, whereas this changes into the units volume. So if I tap here, I see that the translator signal chain has an order. So song properties can also add custom translators. And here what happens, the signals coming into a track first goes into the translator of the song, then to the tracks translator, then to the parts translator. Well, there are no translators for the song, so we just bypass that. We get to the track. The translator on the track applies, converts my pedal signal into cutoff frequency, and therefore when we get to the part, we don't have the expression pedal signal. But if we change the order here, now the part applies first. So when I'm here, there are no custom translators on this part. The tracks translator applies because there are no other translators that we are going through. But here, this time our expression pedal just acts as a volume function. As you see, the translator just changes the volume. So these are basic translations, but custom translators also have some additional functionalities like changing sections, starting a player, and so on and so forth. So here on this part, I'm going to add a translator, and this time I'm going to choose notes. And as the output, I have lots of options here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but special actions is probably the one that I use the most often. So I have a bunch of trigger conditions, trigger actions actually, and next section is one of them. So this actually means when the incoming signal is a note signal and it satisfies these two conditions, actually these three conditions, meaning the note range is between these two, the velocity range is between these two, and it's a note on signal, then this action is performed, which means we move to the next section. So I want to assign a single note to move to the next section. Let's say, so I tap on this button, press the note to assign the lower range of my trigger range, and assign the upper range, press the same note, so it's just C4. Now that triggers the next section. Okay, it's not happening right now because a part is activated. These changing section triggers only happens when a section is selected. So if I press the section and start playing, then C4, as soon as I press it, I move to the next section. So I can assign certain notes to move to the next section, or maybe a pad, a keypad on your keyboard to change sections. Here's another important example with player units. So let me load the same song here, and let me add a couple of markers. I'm gonna create two custom translators on this track. And the first one is the input signal is player events. So whenever I have a player unit, the custom translators connected to that player unit have these player events. And I'm going to choose when current time reaches a marker. Then outputs, I choose special action, move to end section. Okay, what is end section? Whatever the marker's position is, we move to the same position on the section. So marker 1 corresponds to section 1, marker 2 corresponds to section 2, and so on. So let's move the current position somewhere near marker 2 and start playing, and let's see what happens. As you see, it automatically changes to section 2 as soon as it reaches marker 1. So similarly, I can do the opposite. So this time I'm going to check global events. When a section is activated, which means when the nth section is activated, I choose player triggers. I move my current time to the nth marker. So let's play and see what happens. When I select this section, it moves to the second marker. When I select this, it moves to the third marker. And let's actually get this closer to the third marker. I move to the third section with third marker. And when it reaches the fourth marker, it will switch to the fourth section. Like this. Now, KeyStage can be controlled by Midi devices externally, and there are lots of ways to control it. So I'm just going to show a couple of them. So let's go to Preferences and go to External Midi Control. Now, there is this section which allows you to use a MIDI pedal, for example, to change sections. Let me first choose the inputs. So I'm going to choose my Node keyboard. That's the only MIDI device that I connect to my iPad right now. But you can actually connect multiple MIDI devices. So there is change section with CC values. That actually means that if I send a control change, for example, a control change number with value 3, it moves to section 3. But I don't want to do that. So I disable this option, but instead I want to just choose a CC number for next section and CC number for previous section. Actually, I'm just going to choose a CC for next section. So you press MIDI learn. I press my switch pedal connected to my Node. It sends control change 82. So this means when I press my pedal, it automatically changes to section 2. Now the next thing is this external control parts. So track inputs changes parameters. I'm just going to show you that the rest are similar, but this is already activated. This actually means that any MIDI input coming from the tracks changes the parameters inside an activated selected part. So for example, I have this parameters here for Node Electro, and you can see the CC numbers next to them. And if I move my volume slider here, it automatically changes the volume here and assigns that volume value to this part. The important thing is, if a part is not selected, the volume signal still goes through, but it's not assigned to that part. So if I look at this, the volume has not changed. So the part has to be selected in order to make the changes. So this allows you to quickly configure your parameters using your hardware. So since I'm using Node keyboard as the MIDI input to control Node Electro's inbuilt synthesizer, the parameters control these synthesizers. So I don't need to just use these sliders and knobs here. I can just make the adjustments directly on my Node keyboard with the knobs and sliders. And everything are just recorded on this part, as long as the part is selected. Okay, what happened with the audio units? So let's choose Sunriser, and I'm going to choose my Node keyboard again. So audio and parameters are not assigned any control change numbers, except the standard 2 audio unit, volume, and pen. So these are already assigned CC numbers. These are assigned automatically. Though you can change them, but more importantly, you can assign control change numbers to these parameters. And allows you to control the audio units using your MIDI controller. So the live console of KeyStage is optimized for live performance. It can be accessed by pressing this button here, which brings up this whole new interface. So I built this simple song here, and when I select the section, you can see that you can change the colors of these sections. Let me actually do some color adjustments quickly. When I activate the live console, you can see that the top bar represents the color of the section. I can switch between sections by pressing these arrow buttons here. And there are 5 types of live units here: info, XY control, lyrics, melody, and piano units. I'm on the info unit. Info unit basically gives me the layout of my parts, their ranges, and their pitch shifts here. I can just allows me to easily browse. I can have a master volume control here, and I can change the transpose. By the way, I can also change the transpose from the song properties here, global transpose. Each section can have one of these 5 units assigned. So for example, on my first section, I have the info unit. On the second section, suppose I activate XY control. So when I'm on the first section, it shows the info unit. When I move to the second section, I have the XY control unit, which I'm gonna show you how to use it. But suppose on the third section, I wanna show the lyrics unit. So lyrics unit is simple. You can just write your own lyrics here, if you're also, singing back vocals or something. There's the media unit. So media units has some enhancements. It can actually show you audio units, the interfaces of audio units here. So it's categorized in the same way like instruments, effects. I have only instruments right now, but for example, on the fourth section, I want to have access to the audio units interface directly so that I can change these drawbars. And the last one is piano units. So these and XY control units can control parts, but in order to do that, let me actually demonstrate with one part here. Let's this Sunriser. Let's solo this. Now we move to this final part on the translators, the live control units. So the first one is the virtual piano. So this means that the virtual piano now controls this unit. So if I activate virtual piano, this controls Sunriser. But for example, I can control 2 instruments simultaneously. I can control North and Sunriser at the same time. And if I turn on filter nodes from track input switch, this means that this part now receives signals from virtual piano, but it does not receive signal from the actual inputs. So right now, part 3 is controlled by the virtual piano, but my actual piano does not control part 3. And similarly, the X and Y control parameters here allows the XY control units to adjust different parameters on different parts, and you can do this simultaneously. So you realize this icon here. This icon shows whenever an X or Y control or both are activated on that part. So let's just press X control. So its default is the unit volume. The ranges are set like this. So okay, let's delete these parts. I can't really hear what's going on there. Okay, why is it not working? Because I forgot to turn off this switch. So my keyboard cannot access to that part. Now the cool thing about the XY control unit is that it's relative. So it's not like this sends volume 0 and this sends full volume. It keeps track of the volume value. So whatever the volume is right now, I start increasing it here. And I can start increasing like this or decrease it like this. So it's just relative to your initial position on the XY control. And the XY control unit can control like master volume, other control change signals, pitch bands. Now back to the live console. As I say, where we can have assigned different units to different parts. Let's look at the media section. There is actually this PDF and JPEG files section here. Since I don't have any of them yet, I need to import one. Here is one PDF file. Let me export it into KeyStage. So if I go to Files, Media Folder, PDF and JPEG files, I can see the PDF file here. I can double tap to just open it here. But now, if I go to Media Units, I can access to this PDF file here. And what it does is it actually stores the PDF file itself, including its zoom and position adjustments that you do here. So this view exactly is stored on this section. So for example, if I move to another section and activate the same PDF file, suppose I want to just show this part of the PDF, and I move to the next section, it just moves to whatever's stored on that section. And finally, if I go to the info unit, there are actually two additional tabs here. The global panel basically shows overview of the song with each sections with all the splits and layers just marked out here. I can just easily switch between sections here, and I can change the layout, the horizontal division and vertical division. And the last one is just the main mixer again. So you can access the main mixer directly from the live console as well. And one thing that I have forgot to show you is the main mixer, either on the live console or on the main view here, has this compact view, which hides the effects chain here, although the effects are still there. And you can also hide and show the MIDI tracks. So if you're just working on a pure MIDI setup, without any audio units, you can still use the main mixer to just mix your volume levels on MIDI tracks. So finally, I want to go through some of the preferences menus here. I'm not going to go deep into the details, but so as you know, we can access in-app purchases here. I'm going to talk about this when I talk about set lists. I can access tutorial demo videos. The Dropbox integration, I'm just going to cover it in another tutorial video. MIDI connections is also omitted here. I talked about external MIDI control a little bit. Instrument presets also another topic that needs to be covered, like editing, creating new instrument presets. Audio settings, well, there are some things that I can talk about here. I can just change the sample rate and buffer size. Master volume also controls MIDI tracks. This is actually important because behind the scene, what this master volume slider does is, okay, it changes the volume of the global volume of the audio units, but what about MIDI units? So if we are actually combining audio units and like MIDI connections, like I do here. So for example, there is the Sunriser's volume and there is the Nord Electro's volume. So this slider sends volume signals to Nord, whereas this is just an internal volume slider of KeyStage. What this does is, this changes the global volume, but it also changes the volume of Nord. This acts as a multiplier on the volume signals of MIDI tracks. So, for example, when I take this all the way up to 127, this actually doesn't send 127 volume signal to north. That volume signal is actually multiplied by the level of this volume here. So when it's all the way up, it's basically multiplied with 1, which means it doesn't change. When it's all the way down, all the volume signals are multiplied with 0. When it's, for example, just on the halfway down, everything is just divided. So 127 volume signal is translated into 63 volume signal. So therefore the volume signals on MIDI tracks can be controlled with this master volume. But if I disable this volume slider basically have no effect on the MIDI tracks anymore. This is the north sound, and this has no effect at all. Okay, skipping to this recording. Well, KeyStage has a multi-track recorder, so let's demonstrate that. So from the main mixer, so I can enable these recordings and start recording. Well, okay, my master volume is down. And what happens is, if I go to File, let's get back to Audio Files, there's this recordings. So it's new song on today, the date, and each track's recorded WAV file, and these are the exact times that they are recorded. So I can play them. Well, it was muted in the beginning, but and I can just send them to anywhere. And what I can do is I can even zip them and send the zip file to anywhere. Okay, since we are on the file system here, there is a general gesture is that when I double tap on something, for example here, Midi folder, when I single tap on it, it says open on the top right corner. When I double tap on anything, whatever shows on the top right corner triggers. So when I double tap, it opens. So for example, I create a new folder here, just a random name, and I double tap, it opens that, and I save the file here. I save my song here. Okay, the name of the song changes. So when I tap here, it says load. So it loads the song. So let's load a new song first. And when I double tap on here, it accesses into the folder. And when I double tap on the song, it loads it because that's the default action. And I have these standard functions like delete, copy, move, rename. I'm not going over them right now. Let me create a couple of songs quickly. So let's go into Setlists and I'll create a setlist. These are my root directory. This is the whole directory. I can access into the folders, and these are all the songs. I tap on the song and put it into the setlist, or I double tap to add it into the setlist, or I can select songs here and remove it from the setlist, or I double tap to remove from the setlist. So it's basically the same kind of triggers. So let me add a couple of songs. I can change the order of the songs by just holding them and dragging up and down. And I might click done. I just name the setlist. So I have my first setlist here. I double tap to load it. And here is my setlist. So I can switch between songs quickly. This is the order by double tapping on them. And not only that, in the live console now, if I go to the last section of the song, the next time I press the arrow, it asks me to confirm whether I want to go to the next song. And I say load. So I can just browse through all the songs with all the sections like this. Or I just activate the global panel. Since I can access the sections like this here, these arrows just stands for changing songs now. So speaking of changing songs, the external MIDI control has also a changing song function. So you can assign a controller to change songs, just like sections. And in the general setting, there is this tiny switch here, prompt when changing songs in the setlist mode. So when I deactivate this, in the live console, for example, when I'm at the end of a song, I want to move to the next song. When I press it, it automatically loads the next song without any confirmation. So that basically removes the confirmation dialog. And one last thing that I forgot, this is actually completely unrelated with the setlist. So you can move the parts here. You can copy them, as you know. You can actually squeeze them between parts, vertically or horizontally. You can do the same things here with tracks. But one important feature is you can merge parts like this. So now these two parts are connected to the same track. Let's actually move them here. So whenever you move a part right on another part like this, it just highlights, and you can change the order here. And what happens is that all these three parts are connected to the same track, which basically allows you to do things like, on this range I want to have this velocity. Whereas on this range, I want to have this velocity and maybe another pitch shift. So each part's properties are stored on this part, which allows you more control over a single synthesizer. So how do you actually compress this multi-parts? You basically double tap with 2 fingers anywhere on any of these parts. And now you see this shows multi-parts. You can combine multi-parts into single parts. You can expand them by double tapping with 2 fingers, also compress them. So multi-parts basically works like that. And one other thing that I also forget is this detail part. So detail part basically zooms into the section and shows more information about parts. I can use these buttons to switch between sections, or I can swipe left or right to switch between sections. So since this is a multi-parts, I can double tap to expand it just like in the regular case. And this allows me to change the ranges of parts directly right on the spot without actually going into the parts editor. Or I can do the same thing with pitch shifts. So these are the 2 most commonly used translators. That's why I included them into detailed view. So detailed view allows you to see the overall of your splits and layers and just manipulate them right on the spot.